We figured something a little more pensive for the late night edition of Hunter Talk. Late night, late week edition of Hunter Talk. Welcome, everybody.
Wednesday. This is it's pre-Rec League, the edition. We're just getting everybody hyped up for tomorrow. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, well, there's some things to talk about. There's some things to be hyped about, some things to talk about. And I think, like, you know, last week we spent very little time talking about games and most of the time talking about what happened, right, with the roster. And I think this week is going to be a medium in between that show and a normal show because we're still working our way into this.
Speaking of a normal show, Cole, welcome to Hunter Talk.
Oh, that's right. We do introduce the show sometimes. Welcome to Hunter Talk. We are powered by Rip It Energy Fuel, as always. Now made it official, and we've got the 4th of July cans out today.
Special occasion.
That's right.
Tribute.
So happy belated 4th of July. Speaking of the 4th of July, that's why our show's a little late this week. So that is me on the family travel thing. Hope everyone had a nice holiday. I'm about to take a sip of this to start the show.
The show can officially start.
Yes.
The sip has been taken.
The only energy drink that actually tastes good. And doesn't make you feel like you're drinking some sort of not FDA-approved medicine. All right.
Quite a bar.
And chat, no, we will not be talking about the new champion. Go elsewhere for that. I mean, she's not in the lore book. What are we supposed to do? She's not in here.
Cole, there's probably some reference to her if you look hard enough. Close reading time.
Yeah.
Get in there.
By the way, Shmuley, ASMR Moments only Rec League, so.
Yes. Special. If you want the ASMR, you got to tune in tomorrow. Rec League.
That's right. Okay, so let's jump in. This past weekend was the first weekend where we got to see the new 100 Thieves roster in action. So the bringing back into LCS of Contractz after a stint in Academy for 100 Thieves, and then bumping up Poome, who was an amateur player not too long ago, coming up through the 100 Next program, was thrust into Academy and then thrust further northwards, straight into the LCS, and made his debut this weekend. So rotating those pieces in for Meteos and Stunt has been the big thing, the big topic of conversation.
Feels a little bit like straight from high school to the pros, right? Is that
yeah? He's
my analogies right here.
Yeah, he's like an 18-year-old just declaring for the draft. So we'll go through and talk about each game individually, the Golden Guardians game, then the Dignitas game. Then we'll do some general stuff, and if we have time, do some questions from you guys. I know I got a lot of messages about the new guys this week and about the team, because setting the stage for this discussion, as we mentioned last week, it was a little bit of a trap weekend for us. Because we're making a huge change for the team at a time when we have two of our weakest possible opponents on the schedule, which you'd think, oh, great. You know, what better time to be doing something like this? But at the same time, the immense pressure that's on these guys, combined with the lack of preparation time, just makes it so that, you know, it's quite possible you're going to perform underneath what you're capable of. And that could quite possibly cost you a game against weaker competition. And that's exactly, in my opinion, what happened this week. I do believe that ultimately we will be a better team than Golden Guardians, but we ultimately dropped the first game of this weekend. Jordan, a few things to talk about here. Where would you like to start?
Be honest, like it felt, I guess I'll just start where I'd like to start. Maybe I'll do that. We kind of got outclassed. It looked like this was a team that was much more cohesive and playing as a team more than we were, which you kind of expect, right? It did hurt though, because I don't think that individually our matchups are disadvantaged. Like I think on a normal day, we can kind of take this Golden Guardians team to task. And it just felt, I think that for me, what I left with was they had a plan, they executed it well. Their team comp gelled, and the ease of execution was there too. It's just time after time after time. It's not the first time I've said that, this split. But it really did kind of come down to just, there were flashes of what looked promising and different, and we'll return to that theme, that this team feels different, which I think is very important and encouraging. It just wasn't enough to actually bridge the gap between, 5 disparate pieces on our side and a Golden Guardian team that looked pretty well put together. I'm not saying that Golden Guardians is going to be, strong enough to beat some of the stronger teams in the league, but certainly they played their game. They had a plan and they executed on it. That was my takeaways from this game.
Yeah. I want to talk about plans too, because I think I'm going to return to the Golden Guardians portion of the plan, but I want to talk about the 100 Thieves plan too. I think it is very notable what they tried to do in this game. And look, with the roster moves, obviously they heard the fans who were talking about these things for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the fans made the decision, right? But they hear us, they understand, they made a tough call to make this roster change. Furthermore, right off the bat, in game 1 of this new era of the roster, whatever you want to call it, they went for the plan that the fans would have you do as well, which is put Someday on something where he can get in position to take over a game and invest resources in him, invest your time, invest your jungle presence into the top lane. And that was clear right off the bat. Like that is the very, first manifestation of the game plan. I mean, they came up and got the flash out of Hanser like immediately, like right when the game started. And then Contractz basically lived on the top side of the map for a while. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, so again, that is like the game plan that I think the majority of fans would like to see.
Yeah.
And it didn't go so well this time. And it wasn't because, in my opinion, it wasn't because they weren't like doing what is necessary to make that plan work. They just happened to have someone up there in Hanser who was able to absorb all of that pressure and not commit early mistakes and not let that happen. Now, I'm not saying the execution of the plan was perfect, because it clearly wasn't. Yeah. But it's not like they were making like, they had completely egregiously bad communication between him and Someday or anything like that. It was just really that, Hanser was able to absorb what they threw his way. And that combine that with some unlucky timing and then not the cleanest game overall I don't think from anybody really on our side.
Yeah.
Just meant that it didn't work. So the signal to the fans, I think, is something important here. It's like, all right, we're going to try and play this the way that you would like to see it played.
Right. Yeah. It's the age old strat that we always come back to. I think the difference to me, it felt a little bit like our strat was a little bit more one-dimensional. It's like make Someday strong and then win. And they had a lot more ability to, in their team comp, to respond, to react. We saw some good plays, and then suddenly Damonte shows up, presses R, knocks everybody up, that fight's over.
Follows with the taunt,
there are some of those. Damonte is not my favorite player.
Mm-mm.
I think I feel kind of about Damonte as you do about Solo. Maybe, like, I don't know if you have the same feelings about Damonte.
I don't feel it quite as strong, but I have a pang of that where to me he's just like a personally kind of annoying player. Right? Yeah.
So I did not enjoy watching him in this game. He looked really good. And he was using a lot of his emotes. He had them all on display. which is something I either I have just never paid attention to them before, or I think that emote spam has gone up like 900% with online play.
Yeah, 100% true. That emote spam has increased, like crazy.
On one hand, I love it. I think it's like they put emotes in the game, use them. I think that actually is kind of the precursor to any kind of actual rivalries taking shape, because that everybody sees emotes. Not everybody, you can't see all chat, right? The spectator doesn't show chat, so that's an aside.
Yeah,
but Damonte, he was looking really good, and there were some really aggressive plays from Contractz, and this is kind of getting back to this new style that I am excited to continue to watch, where he showed up and he made a play, and then he made another play on the back of it, and it didn't work. And this is exactly what we talked about last week, Cole. I said, I don't really care if he dies. I don't really care if he hits, especially in these early games. If you ask me this 4 or 5 weeks from now, I'm going to say this has got to stop, right? But early on, you got to kind of get calibrated.
Yeah.
The Volibear ult after the rework, it's a one-way Chad button, right? Like
a one-way Chad button.
You are jumping into the air and you're crashing into the ground, and if it doesn't work, you die really quickly afterwards. So there was one specific one where it's kind of bot river in the bush, and he went back in, and I as a fan, I was like, all right, here we go. And then shortly afterwards, like, there we went. That was it. So there are some of those, right? There are some of those plays, it's just a different experience. As a fan, I like it. And again, this is not me giving him carte blanche to just do this forever, because obviously that's not going to work. But in a game where we actually have the pieces in place to win, I don't think we really had that in this game. The individual play just wasn't where it needed to be. That can be what decides a game, right? Those kinds of plays where somebody takes that percentage play, and maybe it's 30%. A lot of pros are not wired and won't take that play. And he's the kind of player who will do it without thinking, because if you think about it, it's too late. The moment has passed. The window is small. You have to jump it. You have to press R immediately and Chad your way in. And he did it, man. So credit to him. And that's exactly what I was saying last week. I wanted to see him playing his game. I didn't want to see him as a ward, or, just doing some mundane lane ganks that may or may not happen right. It's a different look. And I think that's the kind of refreshing thing we need to see. And of course, we need to now build the rest of the team strat around that kind of play, because Contractz is not going to be any other kind of player if you want him to be good. So we have to now, as a team, learn how do we play with that kind of a player, because it's very different from Meteos. It looked different. It felt different. It just was very different. Yeah,
and interestingly enough, as Chap pointed out, I think that was a lot of problem with Stunt that we had, was him going in and trying to make these plays with a split second, decision. And so but it does feel different with Contractz in this case for a couple reasons. One is it's a new thing. Second of all, that aggression is coming from a different part of the team comp, right? And from a part of the team comp that's really designed for that, and in this meta has been really rewarded for it. But yeah, so definitely something to keep an eye on. How we said he's going to have his int machine moments, right? And surely more are to come. But we'll have to see what it's like to play with that aggression on jungle, and maybe pairing that aggression with the mid lane and the top lane spots on the map as well. And it's, aggression, another thing that I think fans were really asking for, wanting to see that kind of shift in play style and the way that we approach the game. And I did want to back up, because I got some chat feedback. I just want to clarify what I was saying earlier along those lines. Because, I was saying that we are seeing exactly what we want as fans with how they approach this first game. I don't mean to suggest that they're doing that because we want it. I'm just saying hey, watch and pay attention, because now we are seeing the things we asked for.
Totally.
And I think that this game really made that apparent. The other game, maybe not so much, but we'll talk about play style there. Going down, we talked about Contractz. Looking at some other areas of the map, I thought Ryoma had, when I first watched this game, I thought he had a decent game. Like I didn't think it was that bad. I was like, yeah, no, he was fine. Some things didn't work out or whatever. I was encouraged to go back and watch that game again, and so I watched sections of it and watched the highlights again, and kind of just keyed in on him more, and that did convince me to notch down in my mind his performance. I didn't think it was as strong. I don't think it was egregiously bad or anything, but one thing that I saw like a handful of mechanical misplays from him, which was concerning, especially because I think I'm getting set up for some frustration with him, in that something that we always talk about is the lane phase, and how, really if he puts together a better lane phase, he might turn into that more complete player that really has staying power. But especially, early game, he tends to struggle in lane. Then we have games like this, and this has happened a couple other times as well, where when you just focus in on the lane, he quite clearly won that lane against Demonte.
Yeah.
But it came at the cost, right, of the other things that Demonte was able to do that Ryoma was not. And part of that is team comp related, right? Like, Demonte's on Galio, he's on a champ that has so much mobility, that can fly around the map, like quite literally with the ult. And Ryoma was on a champ with like 0 mobility, right? So there's that. But you know what I mean? It's like we finally felt like, yeah, he's doing well in this lane, and we don't get the other piece of it. The piece that, sometimes he does provide, and it just definitely wasn't there. So I didn't think he ended up having a good game. There were a couple of really bad missed ults from him. The petrifying gaze, like, especially at the end of the game, both him and Cody like whiffed ults in top lane in base, and it was just not pretty to watch. So that was kind of disappointing. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I think as time goes on, our bar for him, it will continue to rise. Like, okay, the whole point is you are supposed to be making this upward trajectory of progress as you go along. So when we see dips in it, you have to make sure you don't dip too low, and that you rebound to stay on that trajectory of progress.
Yeah.
So little concerning, not super concerning, but I definitely wanted to be fair, because I've been very pro Ryoma over the course of his tenure here.
Points for being fair. I don't know that I recall seeing him on Cassio as often. I could be wrong. This is one of those things where I say it and people are like, what are you talking about? He played Cassio 6 times this split. oh yeah. That'll be every game. So there are a couple things I want to bring up. One, we're seeing him have these strong performances on a handful of champions, right?
Yeah.
Let me start on a different topic first, because I think this is kind of a precursor to what I want to talk about with the champion piece. Ryoma is also an aggressive player, right? Or at least that's what we all anticipated when he joined this team. We saw the highlight reels. We saw him popping off. We saw him making these crazy plays that, like, where did that come from? And we do see that, right? It's not that we don't see that or that he's not playing those, but a lot of the champs that he's on, their kit doesn't lend itself to that kind of play in the same way.
Sure.
Right. It's really hard. When you're playing Cassio, your job, you're just a DPS machine, right? Like, your job is not to, I'm going to get, people are going to call this oversimplified, but in general, your job is not to outplay people using crazy aggressive plays. It's to position yourself well in a team fight. It's to land your ult. It's to neutralize the people on the team you need to neutralize. And then it's to kind of kite and deal your DPS through some of your empowered attacks. Right. So that is almost more like that's not an Akali, right? That's very different from Akali.
Right.
And I'm not saying you should play Akali, because I know meta is a thing too, right, guys? But the types of champions who I think a lot of people expected to see him play, Yasuo, Akali, I'm going to name some others who are not meta, but like Talon, right? People who can show up, blow people up, disappear, get out of there. Like, those are the kinds of things that we were expecting to see from him.
Yeah.
And we're just not seeing them. And I do wonder if there's a little bit of this. So I'll be interested to see, the point I'm building to is I'm going to be really interested to see how Contractz on this roster changes, if in any way, Ryoma's role in this team. It might be that he is now able to settle more into that control mage role. And that's what he's said as he's talked to people on the heist and, talked to us. He's playing a lot of control mages because that's what's good for the team. And that role is what really helps the team kind of execute on their plan. So he's either, playing something he's not typically used to playing as much of, control mage. And he has great games on them. So I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not his preferred style. If you add a really hyper aggressive player into this mix, I'm wondering if that player, Contractz, can play more of that aggressive play style. I don't know that you need two people who are always forward, right? That always go. I think if you have one person to set him up in a control mage, how much does that do for Contractz, right? Where he's not now one of two people vying to get every kill on the map, but he's taking advantage of a Zoe. How easy is it to rip off kills as an aggro jungler if everybody's asleep on the map? That's a lot different. So I'm interested to see that. The other thing on that is I do wonder if at some point, if we start to get into this groove of letting players play, if we start to see him even try some of these more aggro champs, and maybe we have a kind of a dual threat setup, right? But right now it feels like he's a little bit one-dimensional, which gets to the second point I was going to bring up, which is I'm not as impressed on some of his other champs outside of things like Zoe, Orianna. If you think about these really big games he's had, it's been on probably 2 or 3 main champs. So it'll be an interesting dynamic to watch as this goes. I think what we're learning is the addition or change to 1 or 2 people can really change the overall dynamic of a team. And I think we should expect that in some ways for Ryoma too. Like it'll be interesting to see what role he plays going forward.
Yeah, I do want to say though, like, and I think that someone in chat pointed this out and I agree with it, is that 2v2 skirmish has so many like possibilities. And if you have 2 aggressive skirmishers, that can be really like nice, especially early in the game. So I see what you're saying about like the fit, like one, if he sets up Contractz for like the finishing blows or whatever, like that's valuable. But yeah, I guess I'm still interested in seeing how the aggression could be unleashed between the two of them. I do want them to fight. And
I should back up a little bit to say, I'm assuming the reason that we haven't seen Ryoma on a lot of these aggro champs is because it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to imagine that he came and that those were the things they started playing in scrims, and he wasn't liking it. The team wasn't liking it. For some reason, they've landed on control mages for him. Right. So maybe the 2v2 skirmish thing with 2 aggro players is a possibility. It might also be that in Osh, Urikali is top notch, and in NA, it's a liability. Like it's entirely possible. The competition is different, right? Maybe he just doesn't have that comfort level yet on those types of champs. So I want to leave room for the possibility that there is some legitimate reason that we're not seeing him on those. And it's not just because he's on control mage duty. It's actually because he feels like, and the team agrees, this is our best look.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So yeah, I wonder what's going to happen down the line as these guys get along. And I don't think it's going to happen early, right? But one thing Contractz said in his interview with Travis Gafford from earlier this week, and which, by the way, if you haven't watched that, I definitely recommend that you do. It was a very good interview, and I was super impressed with Contractz. It was very like honest from him. He opened up a lot about like, hey, I wasn't taking Academy very seriously. I thought I was too good for it. And he talked about overcoming that mentality and what it's done for him. It was like a really solid interview. But one of the things he said along the way was that Ryoma gets very vocal when it's time to fight, when he wants to fight. He'll get loud and he'll get vocal and he'll tell him. And Contractz says he's that way too. And so I think over time we're going to see those two like fight more as a unit. And very much looking forward to that. So also I did want to point out, we kind of already talked about Contractz a whole lot. Just making the observation though, man, that was Jungle Difference game though. I'll say like he got so outplayed by Closer on the totality of that game. And I think I think it's exaggerated because of, as I said, so many things he tried early didn't actually end up working, even if they were good ideas.
Yep.
And when you don't have that snowballing forward, dang, that sucks.
Man.
But I want to make that observation because we are going to be talking about how well did these guys do against expectations for this weekend, right? That's what we're going to talk about once we wrap these games. And it would be dishonest if I didn't point that out, because that was, tale of two junglers right there.
Yep. I'm going to do one of my least favorite things, which is look at the draft. And I did go into the Discord after this game was played and just chat with the folks in the Discord a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
On, let me just read back the draft order to you. Golden Guardians picks Ashe. We take Aphelios and Thresh. Golden Guardians takes Graves. So we had 2 shots at Graves and we passed them both up. I continue to be unconvinced that Cody Sun's Aphelios it warrants a first pick. It's a power pick in the meta. It's 200 years of development champ, but there's part of me that feels like he has not shown that he is good enough on it that we got to snatch it up right away. I wonder how that game would have gone if Contractz was on Graves. Graves is so strong right now, and I like Volibear is just reworked. I know that you like to get those reworked champs. I am not convinced that Volibear is as strong as Graves, and certainly the Graves had a better game. So I think some of these plays could have gone differently if we had a Graves instead of a Volley. So it would have been interesting to see. I would have loved to see us grab, especially because both Aphelios and Thresh just didn't feel like difference makers. Where, like you said, big jungle diff. Swap Volibear for Graves, and I think Contractz has a different looking game.
Yeah. By the way, because you said Aphelios Thresh, was that what you said? Yeah. On pick order? Yeah. Okay, cool. Because Aphelios was the first pick according to my notes, and I know chat was going back and forth. So yeah, Jordan, let's see. Oh, we didn't really talk about Poome, actually.
Yeah, we have not talked about Poome at all.
So you did mention though that we picked Thresh for him, and in his first game, I thought it went okay, actually. I didn't think he missed a lot of hooks. I'll say this. He missed a lot of hooks. But I did feel like he was disengaging well. He was sacrificing himself at the right time to save the team. He didn't look tentative or nervous to me, which I don't have a keen eye for that, right? So I'm not I'm not going to be the expert at that, but he didn't look like out of place. He was even tossing around some emotes along the way. I felt like, and I don't think the game went particularly well for him, obviously, but it didn't feel bad to me. Like I was like, okay, that's an all right first game, Yeah. Like
this is actually something else that came up, and I don't know the answer to this. But, in the Discord,
yeah,
he's playing from Canada, and those hooks are millisecond skill shots, right? So it's entirely possible that you land more of those hooks if you have 20 less ping. I don't know.
Some of them were pretty big misses.
Some of them were pretty
zoning hooks.
I don't think so there were some zoning hooks. But it is interesting to think about. It's just we'll never know, and until we see him play Thresh again. And if he lands every hook, then we'll say okay, it was ping. But I generally agree with you. I think Thresh is a really tough champ to play in a losing team, and I think it's actually really interesting that we first picked. When I say first picked, I mean his first game in the LCS picked him Thresh, because it's a champion who largely, and I'm speaking from experience here, largely goes the way of the team, right? His kit is not designed to turn a fight, and I'm going to do something we don't like to do a lot, but I'm going to jump forward to game 2 against Dig. Think about some of the plays, like the disengage plays, right? So he had one disengage play on the Thresh. He flashed, flayed, boxed.
Yeah.
Top inhib toward the end of the game. Great play. You do that once every 5 minutes, right? At most. And that is, the kit is not built for that. It's built for single. It's like protect the president, drop the lantern. How many people could take the lantern? One. So it's just not a champ that's designed to save an entire team all at once. It's meant more for single target, both picks and saving. He uses Flay well. He used it well in lane a couple times to try to buy some space.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you're being, if you're getting pressure from 3 sides, there's not a lot you're going to do on Thresh. So it was kind of a tough one. Luckily, obviously, his mental is resilient because he came back and in the dig game and had quite a game, and we'll talk about that. And if we want to transition now, we can take that hook.
Just one more thing. Oh, take that lantern? Take the dark passage to game 2. Thresh segues, everybody. No, one more thing about Golden Guardians, I think. Jordan, were we actually outdrafted in that game or no?
I mean, it feels a little bit contradictory for me to say no after I gave my limited first few picks analysis. Hard question to answer, the yes or no. I'm going to say yes.
I felt outdrafted. I agree with that.
I just kind of come back to the global or semi-globals. You look at Tom Kench, you look at Galio. They were just zipping around, man. And Kennen would show up and fly into the middle of their team. Like, they had so many ways to disrupt and surprise us that it became a real big problem.
I have to name this kind of draft. I've alluded to it so many times now, where we have the draft and I get the feeling that the other team has just this like part of their toolkit that we don't have that is going to be game breaking. Like, I need to name that something because I got that feeling here. And it clearly was on display, and DeMonte, I think, was the biggest factor in that. So I did feel outdrafted. I know that we're going to be playing more limited champion pools, though, so it's not like we have like this infinitely versatile, strategic book of drafts. But yeah, it had that thing again, man. It just had that thing, and I wish I could stop talking about it. I wish I could not get that feeling. But it's happening more often than I would like. And maybe this is my prompt to like, okay, you got to get serious about actually learning like the nuances of the draft to like know for sure if I'm just, because right now I'm speaking from the heart. That's what I do, guys. I just speak from the heart, man.
That's where a lot of our analysis comes from. It feels appropriate, Cole.
So and that's a good time to remind everybody, if you are newer to 100 Talk, just please know we're not Diamond League of Legends players. We're very bad, in fact. We're Diamond 100 Thieves fans. We're Challenger 100 Thieves fans.
Yeah. My day job is not a strategic coach.
Yeah. Now, okay, so that being said, Jordan, let us go and visit Dignitas. We finally are clicking on the lantern you set up for the Dignitas game. Can we start by saying, look, Dignitas is bad.
You can always start by saying that, Cole.
They're really bad right now. And I honestly have nothing against them. I do not have any like Dignitas hate or whatever. They're just not good, man. And
I say this entirely objectively. They looked very bad. They played a bad game. No other way to say it, man. It was rough.
Yeah, it was rough to watch for them, even though I was cheering for the other side. It's like, I don't know. And I think they even had a gold lead for a lot of the early game, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I know that at a couple points they at least did. They had no idea how to play that though. And it was so weird. So evaluating our team it's just a very hard thing to do because you're playing a team that is basically an academy team.
I mean,
maybe somewhere in between academy and LCS, but
when you look at the names of the players on that team, it's like you guys aren't, sleeping, right? You're trying, but it was not working.
Well, Phoenix had a terrible game.
Yes.
Phoenix looked, I think Phoenix looked like the worst, maybe the worst mid laner I've seen play in NA. He looked very bad. Sucks for him, and I'm sorry to say that. Again, nothing personal.
Yeah.
The other player who looked pretty awful, let me transition to this by saying, hey, chat. Hey, 100 Thieves fans. You guys still want Dardoch? Did you see the game? Do you still want him? Should we still have gotten him? Is that where we are? Because dang, man, that was a complete mental boom game from him. That was so bad. I couldn't believe what he was doing, man. He looked like, you know, when you play with League of Legends with like new people and you're like trying to teach them. One of the things that's kind of hard about this game is you don't want to like die a lot.
Yeah.
Like
Dying
you don't want to overchase and die. And you like you drill that into him. It's like, don't just try not to die too much.
Right.
We gotta have those lessons for him.
I feel keenly aware that we're coming from a segment where I just said it's okay if Contractz ints a little bit, but let me differentiate these two. Contractz was making aggro plays in a setting where you'd say there are options available to this player, and one of them is to play aggressively. Dardoch was just doing his own thing. Like, he was chasing people in the jungle he had no business chasing. He was re-engaging when clearly the play was to run away. Like, you know, so he went the aggro route, and I guess the thing you could say is he was committed. He was committed to being full aggro, always fighting, and it didn't work at all.
Well, it's not Lena's fault nobody wanted Dardoch, right?
Yeah, that's right. Can't blame her.
Okay, so as I said, it's just hard to evaluate the team against a team like Dignitas. We need to talk about Poome, though. I thought Poome already in week 1. I thought Poome had his I'm going to show flashes that I could really belong here game, right? I'm not saying he played perfect, but he had some really, really great plays, great mechanical stuff, great game sense stuff throughout this game. And
are you talking about the Dig game?
Yeah, on the Dignitas game.
Yeah.
Where it left me feeling like, yo, we may have something here. Like we may really have something. I mean, some of it was really, really spectacular. The quickness at the exact right time on both disengage and engage.
Yeah.
He played really, really clean, very calculated in and out. You know, like with Rakan, it's like you go in, you set up everything, and you try your hardest to get out without dying. Right. Yeah. And like that's your job. And he was executing that over and over again. I was really impressed that this dude is in his second game of LCS and is getting very clear and direct shout outs from the casters. We're like, wow, that was actually really clean. You know, this was great. Yes. Like he's already showing those flashes. Now flashes are just that, right? They're just flashes. But I mean, we've talked about that over and over again. That's what you want to see on what you call like a developing prospect player. Like you want to see those moments that give you the faith to ride out the worst times, right?
Totally. I would be very happy to see this guy on Rakan again. He, and I would actually say the Thresh game felt a little bit like there were a time or two where I was like, he gets this game, right? Which is not high praise, right?
Yeah.
But in a way that a lot of players you see in the LCS, like there's getting the game at an LCS level in LCS level complexity situations. Like some of the stuff he did with Thresh, I was like, that was a great play, you know, or like he was going for the play that is optimal here. I felt like the Rakan game was a little bit more like a sustained light bulb, right? It didn't feel so much like a flash to me. Like he was playing both sides of the field, right? He was offense and defense. And what you talked about with you get in, you do your thing, you get out. Like he did that in very improbable situations. He managed to find a knock-up, I believe it was on 3, maybe 4, to secure our team a disengage. Like that's the dream peel, right? That is, and then he got out. He didn't die. I'm so unused to that. It was very exciting. And then he flashed an emote afterwards. So there we go. We got the swagger. I was super impressed with this game. I mean, it was not only like what we needed, it was more than we've come to expect from that position, which I think we've all kind of trained ourselves. Stunt's style was more of a I'm gonna engage for us, and sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it won't work out, and when it doesn't work out, I'm dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, it felt very dynamic and it felt creative in a way that I am not used to seeing on our team. I was impressed. And if we see more games like this, I think we are absolutely onto the right kind of thing. This is game 2, right? And to your point, like, this is not us being fanboys. The commentators were getting hyped too, so that tells you a lot. They're
to be clear, we are fanboys.
We are, but I like to think that when I'm excited, it's not because everybody likes Poome Gang.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to give a neutral evaluation of this, and I would say at this point, I've already seen things from Poome that early on. It's early still, small sample size here. I think he definitely has the potential to be a stronger player than Stunt, and that's really what we're going for. When you make a change mid-split, it's very hard to get that even, because if it were as easy as doing that, you probably would have done it at the start of the split, right? So
yeah,
it's positive.
And Togwaggy in chat said he basically had a better weekend than Stunt had all year. You know what I mean? And I think I agree with that. Like, his first weekend was an improvement over anything we got from Stunt all year.
And that's with one Thresh game that was kind of like a meh. The whole game was like a meh. So even with that, I still left this weekend feeling like that was the right move so far. I'm convinced at this point that was the right move.
Yeah. So, yeah, very high marks from me for Poome and from you, obviously. That's really, really encouraging. So it looks like the substitution support has been very good. We'll see how it holds up against, and we'll talk about this later, but against a much harder schedule coming up, right?
Yep. With
FlyQuest and C9 on deck. I wish he wasn't playing C9 so soon. I hope it doesn't go too poorly. But yeah, I'm feeling very confident in that move as well. Contractz also much better game in this, even though he did have Contractz moments. But yeah, like finish. He didn't give away too much in this, and ended up setting up a ton of kills. And he had, if I'm not mistaken, I think he had a very high KP in this game.
Yeah, he's like 1-1-13, I think.
Yes, yeah. So of the kills, let's see, that's 14 out of 15 kills he was a part of.
Yeah.
Love to see that, man. It was not the game he had against Golden Guardians. It was very different with him on the left.
What I was struck by, kind of briefly, on Contractz is he just played Olaf so much differently than Medios does. I mean, he was like, there was one play that they spent quite a bit of time talking about. He like got lost in their jungle. He was counter jungling and kind of got turned around and just ran right back into reinforcements. It's like, yeah, okay, that was just bad. No other way to represent that. But he was a menace. That's kind of the only way I can think to say it. Like, he was just always causing them problems. He was always where they didn't want him to be. And a lot of the time, I mean, that was his one death. He was 1-1-13. So if you're going to make a boneheaded play, okay, make it, then move on. And that's exactly what he did. But he didn't stop playing his game. And he was showing up in a lot of places. Olaf is one of those champions I've come to not really enjoy watching, because I think it's just been such a frustrating champion for us to have in our lineup. It feels so neutralized by around mid game, where it's like if Medios is on Olaf, you could pretty reliably say there will be no plays of consequence from this Olaf after 20 minutes, because we're either so far behind that the only thing you do is die.
Yeah, right.
Or like the best you hope for is he pops Ragnarok and manages to steal. So I thought this was like, again, it's not a perfect game, and I'm not trying to get overhyped, but what I am trying to do is highlight the differences I see and the things in those differences that I consider to be encouraging. And this was a champion who remained relevant, which it's not just Meteos, right? Olaf is one of those champions who, if you don't get an early lead and you don't get something to kind of hold over your opponents, you eventually just kind of get outpaced, you get outpowered. So I thought it was a good game from him, and I was encouraged to see that he was always in their business. It was fun to watch.
Yeah. Worth mentioning, by the way, and I didn't see this, but it's been said a few times in chat, which we can verify later. But Poome apparently said on stream that he and Contractz were doing the lion's share of the shot calling.
Fascinating.
How crazy is that? If that is true,
2 rookies.
The ones who just got bumped up are doing that, right? That is very, very interesting.
Yeah. Which
I want to see if it's verified, to be honest. I want to see it like that come up on the heist or something.
Right. Another interesting thing is, I mean, our team has always seemed quiet. It's always felt like and I think people kind of gravitated towards Meteos because he wasn't quiet. And he was somebody who you could actually kind of feel like you could connect with from a fan perspective in the heist, just everywhere he goes. He's kind of a, he is a more outgoing and energetic person than the rest of our team. So I'm sure that translates into the game, right? I'm sure that is a factor in how this team plays. And you kind of saw it in the heist, right? Where they're at the end of that game.
Yeah.
TSM talking about like, hey, what were you thinking about the comms? How are you feeling? And nobody was saying much.
The comms about the comms were very bad.
And I'm sure it was largely because they're all devastated, right? So this is not like if you get them in the middle of a work day, they'd probably have a little bit more to say, but that could be really big for us if these 2 guys who are coming in. And you think especially about the future of this team, Cole, with the developmental program we have. Like, if this is a preview of what we can expect from 100X, the type of players, I mean, how good is it that we're getting really young players into a formal coaching environment with Fallen Bandit, getting them used to playing as a team and having strong comms? Those guys are styling on everybody. I think that's one of the things that's missing from a lot of and we talked about this in the past too, that's missing from a lot of our solo queue players who are high-ranked solo queue, but don't know how to play as part of a team. So it's another positive thing to hear that. I'll be happy to see if it's kind of verified and the full context of it, but very encouraging.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, and we're going to move into just a few general things. Actually, let's move into evaluating these guys against their expectations. We've done a little bit of that, but let's just flesh it out a little bit before we move on. I think like the expectations that we had for these guys were that like, hey, it's gonna not be perfect at the start, and it might even be bad at the start. So worst case scenario was like, hey, we're going to lose to both these teams. It's going to look really sloppy. Everybody's going to be out of sync. And then, but our thing was, but it's new. So we're going to give it a pass anyway and just be patient. Right.
Yep.
And then we came out of this. I think when you're talking about Poome, like I said, feeling pretty positive about him, and with Contractz feeling like, I think in the middle, where the performance may not be exactly what we want, but we're getting the style that we want. Like,
yeah.
Them against expectations is pretty awesome. And I think, and Chad is validating this for me as I've been reading it tonight, like everybody is just feeling a lot more positive about the team and feeling like there is an identity to be had and a direction to be had. And while it sucks to lose on game day, like at least we're not like wallowing in the despair that we sometimes have been, when we do these shows.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a sense of excitement. There's a sense of possibility and potential that I just don't feel like has been there much. I mean, when you look at the fact that we didn't change a player and we're having kind of the roughest split, it's like, that is not at all, of course that's where you go. And I'm sure that's where they were too. It's like, we're actually getting worse instead of better. How is this happening? So to make 2 changes and to feel like in some important ways we're already looking better, that can only be encouraging, in the sense that these 2 players are kind of meeting and in some places exceeding the expectations we had of them. There are some other things I think we do need to talk about, and because this is still a 5-person roster.
Well, Kim, before we do that, can I just make a couple other distinctions here?
Sure. I don't want people to lose. I don't want people to think that we're saying it's all rosy. It's all fixed,
because it certainly isn't.
Set.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. But trajectory is always a thing, right? But one of the distinctions we made was that we would hold Contractz to a higher standard because he has the previous experience and he's been in LCS, he's been in Academy for a while. I still think that holds true. I still think, like, game sense wise, I expect him to rein in the deaths. And I still, after seeing Poome like really looking good, especially in game 2, I still want to have a higher bar for Contractz right now.
Yeah.
So I want to be mindful of that. If I'm not mistaken, let me look this up really quick. I think Contractz is still very young, right? Yeah, so he's still only 20 years old. So it's not like he's like this fully formed guy. And I feel like I missed that. Like when I'm thinking about him. Like Poome is also 20, right? Contractz and Poome are both 20 years old. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm gonna have to like think about that and like how do I compare these two against the expectations? Is it fair? The LCS experience, the world's experience with Contractz, it has to mean something, and it has to put him above, what we expect. But this dude has a way to go, right? Like there's time left in his development, and Poome is freshly starting, but he's a little bit more mature. So maybe that's, one of the differences for him.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's also worth mentioning that, so far as expectations go, right now there is, the benchmark for aggressive jungler is Blabber. Like, let's just put it out there.
Yeah, aggressive NA jungler.
That's like the least fair comparison you could possibly have. He's so good, and his team is so good, and they're playing to make him even better than he is. So Contractz won't be Blabber. That's just, can we just put that out there? But it does make it harder for him. Like, that makes Contractz' job harder, right?
Yeah.
If you are a left-handed pitcher and there's only one other left-handed pitcher in the league and he is the best pitcher in the league, people are going to compare you. So it's natural to do. But in large part, it's because you look at Blabber and it's like, man, that dude is aggressive and he never dies, right? He always makes the right ball and he always gets the kill. How does he do this? And can we get Contractz to also please do that? So it's tough. But I think giving him the room to make more mistakes than Blabber, which is going to be something above 0, is right, important.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we already covered the play style shift that we're seeing, the early aggression, greater focus on someday. I feel like we did that justice. I did want to point something else out. Like last weekend, so not this past one, but week 3. I think Cody had his worst weekend we've seen in a long time.
Yep.
He also looked pretty bad against Golden Guardians. And while he finished 7-1-4, obviously they got the win. I don't think he looked quite as good as it felt on the other end of it. Like, I don't know. There's something about it. It's like, is Cody slumping right now? Or is this just a product of, well, I mean, the previous week he was still with Stunt, but now he's with Poome. So there's definitely going to be some kind of regression. Can you help me sort through that? Like how, like if Cody Sun doesn't play quite as sterling as we've seen in the past, especially when he gets to late game, like, do you think this is a synergy with the new support thing? Do you think Cody's in a slump, like mentally, or like what's going on there?
Cody has always been kind of he's almost been like the non-factor, right? We spent the least amount of time probably of anybody on the team talking about him. He's been steady Eddie, reliable. In our worst game, he's going to maybe go 2-0-2, like he typically is able to not contribute to the fact that we're losing. And I would not even approach the idea that he's part of the reason we're losing, right? It's not that he's not making misplays. He's just been able to kind of stay out of the muck that a lot of the time we got bogged down in. And it feels a little bit now. And I think my answer to your question is, I think he's slumping because this started when he was still with Stunt.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged it in the heist and said, something's up, So, and when what I had alluded to earlier was, let's not assume that everything is going to be just fine now that we have two players who can potentially play at a higher level. We still need the rest of the team, which has been solid, to remain just as solid or improve. And if you look at Ryoma's Cassio game, if you look at some of Cody's games, his Aphelios game, that's a major concern. And we've seen Someday performing below what we consider to be his triple A diamond,
right,
unshakable level. We saw that at the end of last split too. So we can't take our eye off the ball. That we need, not only do we need Poome and Contractz to show up and shake things up a little bit, but we need the rest of these guys to play like we know they can. And I'm a little bit concerned about Cody. Like, we need him to get, and I have confidence that he can, right? Like he has a long career of this kind of consistency. So I'm not going to look at 2 weeks and say, oh gosh, it's all over. We need to start. Who's next? Who are going to bring in here?
Plus, like I said, I don't think his Dignitas game was very bad. I don't even think it was bad, but I do think it ended up stats wise looking better than it felt. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it's a small stretch. I don't want to jump on it, but trying to be mindful of that. And like you said, of the other guys as well, like, especially with new blood coming in, right? You want your veteran standbys to be in a position to like lead, right? And to be on top of it, ready to capitalize on whatever new energy and new momentum is there, and to prove their worth. And especially when we've got quite the talent pipeline building up underneath them. So yeah, that's also something to consider. Speaking of which, do you want to do a Trust the Papa thing real quick? Do you want to check in on our how much we're trusting the Papa right now?
Do it.
So clearly the opinion between us is that, these roster moves so far are good, and that, we're willing to wait out the developmental part of this, of like getting them worked into the team before we're really like, okay, where does this leave us? Very interesting. From the heist, Papa Smithy said that, like, when it was clear we were not going to win Worlds with this roster, and that was the consensus between all of us, that's when we made the change. And I mean, I gotta say, like, if I'm being totally honest, as a 100 Thieves fan, I think I've lost sight of the Worlds goal a little bit. Like, I'm not always thinking about Worlds. Like, can we make Worlds with this roster? I'm farther back than he is with that. Like, I'm more in the current moment than anything else. And like, okay, what do we have? And what could that mean for future years? More than I'm like, hey, 8 teams make playoffs. We just need to get in that spot, and then we have a chance to make a run and qualify for Worlds. There are no Worlds points, you just have to make top 3 in the final run. So I'm glad he's got that long-term vision. And I'm glad he had the courage to make kind of an unpopular move in some respects with Meteos. The stunt one I don't think was unpopular at all. And I mean, it does seem like even since the dust settled that there's majority approval of the Meteos switch, but still a difficult situation. And he's a first-time general manager. This is the first time he's really having to come to face with getting rid of a player who is personality-wise popular and has a long history. So I admire that. And then just the talent pipeline coming up is something that's being talked about a lot more in recent weeks. Poome was pretty much the trigger for that, but since Poome's come up, now there's so much attention and focus on Tenacity and Kenvi as well, who are looking like super promising prospects. Granted, Tenacity would be behind someday, but yeah, just like seeing everything that's going on, it's like, it sure seems like if they're able to hold on to these guys and get them on contracts, that the future could be very bright. So at the end of this monologue that I didn't really set out to give, I have to say right now, I'm feeling the TrustThePapa love.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, we're in a better place at the end of this week, this most recent week, than we were the week before. So I would have a hard time saying I trust the Papa less at this point than I did the week before. And here's an interesting thing. Here's something I had not factored into the fan experience for this split this year in any way, shape, or form. I did not think we would have the ability to really appreciate 100 Next. When they announced 100 Next, I thought it was going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe in 3 years we'll see some of these guys in Academy. That would be kind of cool. Interesting. So never in my wildest expectations did I think we're going to see one of the 100 Next players in the LCS in 2020. And I'm sure they didn't either. But here's the interesting thing. Poome's doing well. And he's got 1 week under his belt. So we'll see what happens next week. Next week's going to be tough because the schedule says it's going to be tough. He's going to get more time. He's earned himself more time. He's shown that he can play. He's at the very least better than I'd say anybody on Dig. There's no part of me that says, man, I wish we would have kept Afro over Poome. What did we do? If Afro styled all over Poome and just made him look silly in lane, that would be a really bad feeling. It would feel like we'd made major, we'd regressed in a serious way. Didn't see that at all. And I still love Afro. This is no commentary on him. I'm just saying where we're at now feels like a good spot. So here's the secondary effect that has. Everybody now is going to look at these other guys and say, okay, so the 100 Next guys are legit. And it's not just that they're face rolling their way through kind of nobody competition. Poome can show up and have the game he had against, an LCS team. Dig.
A sort of LCS team.
Oh, a sort of LCS. LCS team. Imagine what some of these guys who are popping off in these 100 Next games could do. Kenvi and Tenacity. How would they look in the LCS? People are going to start thinking about that. And they're going to start wondering. From a GM perspective, in my opinion, that generates so much more trust. That's like the equivalent of a college coach who has a talent pipeline that other coaches dream of, right? Yeah. He's getting all of the 5-star recruits from Florida, right? How good is that for you as a GM or coach or whoever does the recruiting at your school? So that's huge. This is a huge bet that we made. That was a super smart bet, by the way, because, we bet on this talent and we probably put a fraction of the contract of an academy player on the line, right?
Yeah.
It required pretty minimal investment and we're already reaping the rewards. This is going to be exciting to watch. And, I mean, it's done a lot for our brand too. So
honestly, it may be like as far as the League of Legends program is concerned, since 2018, it's probably the single smartest thing that has been done by the team, and probably the one of the things that has built the most goodwill towards 100 Thieves. Honestly, like one of the most popular, like can't fault it things that we've done. And that was done at an incredible risk too. It's not like that, it's hard to identify players who are very young, put them together in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They did it. The dudes look great. It's paying off. Name me a better decision since the 2018 roster was put together, really.
Yeah, I can't. So to get back to the question, trust the Papa meter. I think Papa's feeling good right now. He's making bets and they're paying off. And, we're not a lock for Worlds. We're not a lock for playoffs.
Yeah, we're not even a lock for playoffs right now. Yeah,
we're in a better spot than we were at the end of last week. And I think at this point, you gotta take it week by week and just look at that's what progress looks like right now. Are we better at the end of this week than we were at the end of last week? Because if you can keep that going, generally in aggregate, then that's what you want. That's what you're aiming for.
Yep. Okay, Jordan. Let's do, if you're cool with this, let's do lightning round through some of the listener questions and takes. So go through them very quick, and then talk about this weekend's games, do predictions, and then we'll call it a night. So at the first one, at Leash Terrell, who is always on this list because I'm telling you, this guy, I love his takes, I love his questions. So yes, he's basically a weekly presence on this list for us. But at Leash Terrell says, I need another weekend to get more data before I can make any good judgments. But I like the faster pace, the rooms from Poome. All in all, the ceiling was raised a bit.
Mm-hmm.
End of podcast. Basically, if we started and just said that, that's probably sufficient.
Right. That's the show notes call right there.
Yeah. At Kurasai says, do you think 100T are finally switching their play style to a more aggressive one, which we already answered yes? Or is it just a couple of games playing against easy opponents? So Jordan, I think the real thought behind that question is, clearly we played aggressive. Is that because we were playing against bad competition and against stronger competition? Are we not going to even be able to play aggressive, or what?
I like this question. It's a nuanced question. I want Cody Sun to play less aggressively. I want him to position in the way he always has and be that mid to late game team fighter that wins games for us. So in some ways, I think we need to be careful that we're not switching our play style overall to be more aggressive. But I do want Contractz to continue to be aggressive because I think that generates us leads in ways that we've not enjoyed in a long time. So my answer is I hope that Contractz continues to play as aggressively as he has this last weekend, even against the opposite end of the table next week in FlyQuest and Cloud9. Yeah.
Which we'll continue to talk about here in a minute.
Yep.
At Montgomery 4_W, genuinely, how do you think our full 100X team would finish in LCS if we gave them a full split? I think 100 next would be an 8th or 9th. I think they're better than Dignitas.
I think that's fair.
And they might,
I honestly, yeah.
They might be able to steal another one.
Yeah. If you give them their boy Poome back, I think that's a pretty solid bet.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
That's a fun question, and I don't want to overstate it because it's an amateur team, but geez, they look pretty good.
Those dudes have fun when they play, you can tell.
Yeah. At Busta7718 says, do you feel have a chance to make Worlds with the said roster, or are we in a rebuilding stage where a chance of Worlds would be mere luck? I think at this time a chance at Worlds for us is mere luck. I do think that. We basically have half a split with this roster, and we're not sure what the permanence of some of these guys is going to be. So yeah, I'm with mere luck if we have a shot at making Worlds.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would be very happy. I definitely want us to make playoffs. I think if we don't make playoffs, that is very disappointing. But yeah, I think I don't have any expectations that we make Worlds.
Yep.
The other teams at the top are too well established, too strong, and they've had more time than us to make their case for Worlds.
Yep. At Palm Tree 977 says, would you make any roster moves in the sense of buying someone, or instead move the amateurs up or academy players up or stick with this roster for next year, depending on how they finish. Too early to tell, right?
Good questions this week.
Yeah. It's 1 week of these guys. Like I think too early to tell on this question.
Personally, I'm intrigued by the amateurs. I'm kind of feeling like my concern with buying someone is that you basically lose the cap space needed to secure one of these amateurs on a longer term contract.
And when he says cap space, he doesn't mean that literally. He's talking about the cash,
the money you have to run your team.
Right.
Right. There's no cap, but money is real and dollars exist. So they're going to need to have those if they want to sign these guys to contracts when it comes time to do that.
Okay, final question. At Togwaggle says, what are your thoughts when looking at our schedule for the next 2 weeks? It is a nightmare, yet we don't have much time to keep slacking. I think maybe we can beat TSM, but the other teams are so much better than us right now. If somehow, by the grace of gods, we edge out 2 wins, I think it will be monumental for our confidence heading into the last few weeks. Jordan, schedule coming up. I mean, we got FlyQuest C9 this weekend. Do you see wins on the board there? And do you agree with the premise that we need to eke out a couple of wins soon to have a shot?
I mean, we just talked about the fact that I'm going to be like, we don't expect Worlds. We're going to be playing a lot of teams who are in Worlds contention. So if you don't expect to make Worlds, you expect to lose to those teams. It's not the end of the world. But if we don't get wins against these teams who are vying for the top spot. That being said, it can be a huge confidence builder for us to get those wins. So I think you look for the kinds of things that we've been looking for. You look for progress. You look for positive signs, grit. You look for a plan. Does it feel like we have a plan, or are we just going in hoping to get comfort picks and then getting beat because we're not as good at normal League of Legends as the other team? Or do we come with something a little bit different? So those are all things to watch for. Just because it's a team that you don't expect to beat doesn't mean you're not watching for something. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I think just to wrap all this up, I think coming up this week, Sandwich in chat has promised 100 gifted subs if 100 Thieves is able to knock off C9.
Oh.
So first of all, what a real one. Second of all, I gotta say, I think he's safe. I think his pockets are safe right now. I don't see us putting it together against the 8-0 C9. FlyQuest, I also don't expect us to win. I think this is going to be an 0-2 weekend, at which point the schedule starts getting a lot more friendly to us. So we'll have to see. But I do think we go 0-2 this weekend, and we continue to see. If I'm being 100% honest, I think we're going to see the exact same thing this weekend that we saw this past weekend, where like in terms of Contractz and Poome, I guess, where Contractz will have one game that he looks pretty good on, one game that he looks a little iffy on, and that Poome will have his flashes.
Yeah.
And not completely take over, but he'll be like, oh man, cool. Poome's looking good. I literally think it'll be the same thing this weekend, even though these two teams are both much higher quality than what we faced. And so I think we ultimately go down to both of them.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think this is an 0-2 for us, but I will say, I think we have a chance against FlyQuest. I will be very interested to see. I mean, the reason you have an aggressive jungler is because that can be a carry position, right? So let's see what we can do so far as Contractz when it comes to the draft, getting him on a champion that can take over a game. Like it's kind of a long shot, but that's what you need to take when you're playing against a team who has, more wins than you times 5.
Right. Times 5.
So let's see what happens. I mean, it'll be fun to watch. I'm not going into this weekend with a sense of dread. I'm going into it with a sense of
discovery.
Discovery.
Excitement.
See what we discover. Yeah.
Let's see what we do together, friends. All right, let's wrap the show. We're gonna stick around. We're gonna raid Poome right when we finish this. Mark Thunderfish showing up in chat, by the way, says we're gonna 2-0 this weekend. I'll give 5 subs if we don't, and 10 if we do. So there's another sub gifting promise. Get in on this, everybody. Bet some subs either way, like Mark did. We love that.
And we won't hold you to it either.
Yeah.
So it's all fun.
Hey, look, we're gonna wrap as we get to say now. This has been 100 Talk powered by Rip It. What a great drink. Get you some right now. As always, we love you and we miss you already.
Take care.